An Arab billionaire sneered, "Solve this and I'll give you $155 million. Nobody believed it, but the maid calmly did the impossible. And his jaw dropped in shock. Please like and comment if you're enjoying this incredible love story. Your engagement helps us bring you more amazing romantic tales. The 68th floor of Al Rashid Financial Tower buzzed with the kind of tension that only accompanied billion-dollar disasters. Khalil al-Rashid stood behind his mahogany desk, his dark eyes scanning the panoramic view of Manhattan, as if the city itself could provide answers to the algorithmic nightmare that had been plaguing his company for 3 months. At 34, Khalil had built his empire from inherited oil money into a technological powerhouse that dominated markets across 4 continents. His perfectly tailored Armani suit, worth more than most people's annual salary, couldn't hide the frustration radiating from his 6-foot frame. The stubble on his sharp jawline suggested sleepless nights, though his pride would never let him admit defeat. "Sir, the development team is requesting another meeting," his assistant Marcus announced from the doorway, his voice carefully neutral. Everyone knew better than to push their demanding boss when he was in this mood. "Tell them I don't want excuses, I want solutions," Khalil snapped, his slight accent making the words sound even more dismissive. "We've thrown $50 million at this problem. Our stock price has dropped 12%. And still, no one can crack this algorithm." The door closed with a soft click, leaving Khalil alone with his mounting anger. The quantum encryption protocol his company desperately needed remained unsolved, despite hiring the best minds money could buy. MIT graduates, Stanford PhDs, former NASA engineers, all had failed spectacularly. Through his floor-to-ceiling windows, he watched the city that never slept, oblivious to his billion-dollar headache. The irony wasn't lost on him that the man who could buy anything couldn't purchase the one thing he needed most: a solution. The soft sound of a vacuum cleaner humming in the outer office broke through his brooding. Khalil glanced at his Patek Philippe watch, 11:47 p.m. The cleaning crew was making their nightly rounds, invisible workers who maintained the pristine environment where fortunes were made and lost. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, expecting Marcus with more bad news. Instead, a young woman entered, pushing a cart loaded with cleaning supplies. She moved with quiet efficiency, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing the standard gray uniform of the cleaning company. Something about her posture caught his attention. She carried herself with a dignity that seemed oddly out of place. "I'm sorry, Mr. Al-Rashid," she said, her voice surprisingly clear and educated. "I can come back later if you prefer." Khalil studied her for a moment. Most cleaning staff avoided eye contact with executives, but this woman looked directly at him with intelligent brown eyes that held no trace of intimidation. Interesting. "No, go ahead," he said, turning back to his computer screen where lines of impossible code mocked him. "I'll be here all night anyway." As she began dusting his bookshelf with methodical precision, Khalil found himself stealing glances at her. There was something almost meditative about her movements, as if she found peace in creating order from chaos. Unlike the frazzled energy of his highly paid employees, she radiated a calm competence that was oddly soothing. "You work late hours," he observed, more to distract himself from his problems than out of genuine interest. "Night shift pays better," she replied without looking up. "And it's quieter. Less complicated." Something in her tone suggested she knew about complications. Khalil found himself curious despite himself. "What's your name?" "Maya," she said simply, moving to clean his desk area. Her eyes inadvertently fell on his computer screen, where the impossible algorithm code was displayed in all its maddening complexity. Khalil noticed her pause, her cloth hovering over the surface of his desk. "Problem?" he asked sarcastically. "Don't worry, you won't break anything. Though at this point I'm not sure it could get any worse." Maya's eyes were fixed on the screen, her brow furrowed in concentration. "This is quantum encryption," she said quietly, almost to herself. Khalil's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" She seemed to realize she'd spoken aloud and quickly looked away. "Nothing, sir. I should finish and let you work." But Khalil was standing now, his full attention focused on her. No, what did you just say about quantum encryption? Maya's cheeks flushed slightly. I recognized some of the mathematical patterns. I used to study computer science. Used to? Khalil moved closer, his business instincts suddenly alert. Before becoming a janitor? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Life doesn't always follow the plan, Mr. Al-Rashid. There was steel in her voice now, and Khalil realized he'd touched a nerve. Good. In his experience, people revealed their true nature when pushed. This algorithm, he said, gesturing at the screen, has stumped teams of PhD mathematicians for 3 months. It's cost my company millions. But you think you recognize it? Maya's eyes met his directly. I didn't say I could solve it, I just said I recognized the pattern structure. Khalil felt a familiar thrill, the same sensation he got when sensing weakness in a business negotiation. Here was an opportunity to either expose this woman's pretensions or something else entirely. Tell you what, he said, his voice taking on the smooth, dangerous tone that preceded his most ruthless business moves. If you're so confident about patterns, here's a challenge. He pulled out his phone and transferred funds with a few quick taps. I just put $155 million into an escrow account. Solve this algorithm and it's yours. Maya stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. Mr. Al-Rashid, I think you're not being serious. I'm always serious about money, Khalil replied, his dark eyes glinting with a mixture of amusement and challenge. You have 1 hour. Solve what MIT's finest couldn't, and walk away richer than most small countries. Fail and admit you're just another janitor with delusions of grandeur. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Maya's cleaning cart seemed to mock the absurdity of the situation. A billionaire offering a fortune to a woman who cleaned toilets for minimum wage. Why would you do this? Maya asked quietly. Khalil shrugged, though his casual gesture belied the intensity in his eyes. Call it entertainment. I'm tired of watching expensive experts fail. Maybe it's time to see what happens when someone with nothing to lose takes a shot. Maya looked at the computer screen again, then back at him. Something shifted in her expression, a hardening of resolve that transformed her face completely. When she straightened her shoulders, she no longer looked like a janitor at all. 1 hour? She asked. 1 hour. Maya moved to his chair and sat down with a confidence that made Khalil's pulse quicken. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment, before she began typing with a speed and precision that immediately told him he'd made a terrible mistake, or discovered something extraordinary. Maya's fingers flew across the keyboard with the fluid grace of a concert pianist, her previous deference completely abandoned. The transformation was so complete that Khalil wondered if he was witnessing an elaborate con, or something far more intriguing. The core issue isn't the encryption itself, she murmured, her voice taking on a completely different cadence, analytical, confident, with undertones of excitement. It's the quantum entanglement verification protocol. Whoever designed this was thinking in classical terms about quantum behavior. Khalil moved behind her chair, watching lines of code appear and disappear faster than he could follow. The scent of her shampoo, something clean and understated, reached him, and he found himself oddly distracted by the graceful curve of her neck as she worked. You're debugging 3 months of work in real time, he observed, his voice closer to her ear than strictly professional. I'm not debugging, Maya replied without looking up. I'm rebuilding. Your team was trying to force a square peg into a round hole. The mathematical foundation was flawed from the beginning. Her confidence was mesmerizing. This wasn't the hesitant janitor from 20 minutes ago. This was someone who spoke the language of advanced mathematics as fluently as she breathed. Where did you learn to code like this? Khalil asked, genuinely curious now. Maya's hands paused for just a fraction of a second. MIT, Computer Science and Applied Mathematics, double major. Graduated summa cum laude. The casual way she dropped this information while completely rewriting his company's most challenging project struck Khalil as either massively arrogant or entirely truthful. Either way, he was fascinated. MIT, he repeated. And you're working as a janitor because... Because sometimes brilliant people make catastrophically stupid personal decisions, Maya said, her voice tight with controlled emotion, like trusting the wrong person with everything they've built. There was a story there, and Khalil found himself wanting to hear it. In his experience, the most interesting people were those who'd fallen from great heights and survived. Betrayal, he guessed. Maya's typing never slowed, but he caught the almost imperceptible tightening around her eyes. Business partner, also my fiancé. Amazing how efficiently someone can destroy your life when they have access to both your heart and your bank accounts. The bitter edge in her voice was unmistakable. Khalil felt an unexpected surge of anger toward a man he'd never met. He stole from you? He stole everything, Maya said simply. Company, patents, reputation, investment capital. By the time I realized what was happening, he'd positioned himself as the genius behind our innovations, and me as the pretty face who'd gotten lucky with connections. Khalil studied her profile as she worked. The strong line of her jaw, the focused intensity of her expression, the way she commanded the computer like it was an extension of herself. Nothing about Maya suggested someone who'd gotten anywhere based on looks alone. Your patents? He asked. Blockchain security protocols, 3 of them, now worth about 200 million combined. Maya's laugh held no humor. Turns out love makes you sign documents without reading them carefully. Jesus, Khalil breathed. He'd heard of similar cases, brilliant innovators destroyed by trusted partners. But hearing it from someone currently earning minimum wage while casually revolutionizing his company's code created a cognitive dissonance he wasn't prepared for. Almost finished, Maya announced, her voice returning to its professional tone. Your quantum verification system needed to account for temporal variance in entangled particles. The algorithm was assuming static behavior in a dynamic environment. Khalil blinked. I understood maybe half of that. You don't need to understand it, Maya said with the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. You just need it to work. The smile transformed her completely. Suddenly, he could see the confident MIT graduate she'd once been, the brilliant innovator who'd built something worth millions. It also made him acutely aware of how beautiful she was when she wasn't hiding behind the protective shell of someone society preferred to ignore. There, Maya said, leaning back in his chair. Run the verification protocol. Khalil moved to look over her shoulder at the screen. The code was elegant in a way that spoke to mathematical beauty rather than mere functionality. Even with his limited programming knowledge, he could see the difference between this and the clunky attempts his team had produced. He executed the verification sequence, hardly daring to breathe. Numbers scrolled across the screen in patterns that had eluded his experts for months. And then, impossibly, incredibly, the system displayed 2 words that had become the holy grail of his company's efforts. Verification successful. Holy shit, Khalil whispered. Maya stood up from his chair, smoothing down her gray uniform with hands that were perfectly steady. The escrow account information should arrive in your email within the next few minutes. The transfer will complete automatically once the system passes all verification tests. Khalil stared at her. You actually did it. I told you I recognized the pattern structure, Maya said mildly, as if casually earning $155 million was a typical Tuesday night activity. Maya, Khalil said, and something in his voice made her look at him directly. This is going to sound insane, but I need to ask, are you really a janitor? She tilted her head, considering the question. I really clean offices for 8 hours a night, 5 days a week. I really live in a studio apartment in Queens that costs 60% of my income. I really haven't used my MIT education professionally in 3 years. But you're not really a janitor, Khalil pressed. Maya's smile turned sad. Mr. Al-Rashid, when you lose everything that defined who you were, you become whatever pays the bills. Tonight I was a janitor who happened to solve your algorithm. Tomorrow I'll go back to being a janitor who's rich enough to quit but probably won't because, honestly, I have no idea what else to do with myself. The vulnerability in her admission hit him unexpectedly. Here was a woman who'd just demonstrated intellectual capabilities that would make her invaluable to any tech company in the world, and she sounded lost. You could come work for me, Khalil said impulsively. Maya laughed, but not unkindly. Mr. Al-Rashid, You just handed me enough money to retire. Why would I want to work for someone who settles corporate disputes by throwing around nine-figure challenges? Because, Khalil said, moving closer to her, I suspect you're the kind of person who needs to create things. And I'm the kind of person who makes creation possible. For a moment, something electric passed between them. Maya's eyes widened slightly as if she was seeing him, really seeing him, for the first time. Khalil felt his pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the fascinating woman standing in his office at midnight, having just turned his world upside down. Then Maya stepped back, breaking the spell. I should finish my rounds, she said quietly. Congratulations on solving your algorithm problem, Mr. Al-Rashid. She moved toward her cleaning cart, but Khalil caught her arm gently. Maya, have dinner with me tomorrow night. She looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. You're asking your janitor on a date? I'm asking the most brilliant woman I've ever met to dinner, Khalil corrected. The fact that I met her while she was emptying my trash can is just interesting timing. Maya studied his face for a long moment. Mr. Al-Rashid, we both know this is a terrible idea. Probably, Khalil agreed. But I haven't been this intrigued by anyone in years, and after tonight I suspect you might be worth a few terrible ideas. 24 hours later, Khalil found himself in the unprecedented position of being nervous. The Michelin-starred restaurant he'd chosen for dinner suddenly seemed too formal. Too much like the ostentatious displays of wealth that had probably surrounded Maya during her previous life, and that had ultimately betrayed her. He'd changed restaurants 3 times before settling on a quiet Italian place in the village that was expensive enough to show respect, but intimate enough to actually allow conversation. As he waited at their reserved table, checking his watch for the 5th time in 10 minutes, he wondered if Maya would even show up. The hostess approached with a woman Khalil almost didn't recognize. Gone was the gray uniform and practical ponytail. Maya wore a simple black dress that was elegant without being flashy, her dark hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She moved with the same quiet confidence he'd glimpsed the night before, but now it wasn't hidden beneath the protective anonymity of service work. She was absolutely stunning. Mr. Al-Rashid, Maya said as she reached the table, and there was amusement in her voice at his obvious surprise. Maya, he managed, standing to pull out her chair. You look incredible. You look like someone who wasn't expecting his janitor to clean up well, she replied with a slight smile. Khalil felt heat rise in his cheeks. I deserved that. As they settled into their seats, Khalil found himself studying her more openly. The woman across from him bore little resemblance to the service worker he'd met last night. Her posture was different, her expressions more animated. It was as if she'd been wearing a costume that she'd finally taken off. Can I ask you something? Maya said after they'd ordered wine. Did you really have $155 million just sitting around to throw at a random challenge? Khalil laughed, and the sound was more relaxed than he'd felt in months. Define sitting around. But yes, I could access that amount relatively quickly. Why that specific number? It seemed large enough to be meaningful, but not so large as to be impossible, Maya said thoughtfully. I was trying to calculate how much someone like you might consider worth the risk of looking foolish. Someone like me, Khalil repeated. You mean arrogant and reckless? Maya tilted her head, studying him. I was thinking more like successful enough to take calculated risks and confident enough to bet against conventional wisdom. Her assessment was surprisingly generous, and Khalil felt something warm unfurl in his chest. That's a nicer interpretation than I expected. I'm generally not in the business of insulting men who've just made me financially independent, Maya said with dry humor. Though I have to admit, the way you offered that challenge was impressively dramatic. Impressively dramatic, Khalil mused. I'll take that as a compliment. You should. Most people with your kind of money are boring. All calculation, no instinct. Maya took a sip of wine and something in her expression shifted. Actually, that's not fair. Most people I knew with money were boring, past tense. Tell me about him, Khalil said quietly. Your partner. Maya's hand tightened almost imperceptibly around her wine glass. David, what do you want to know? Whatever you're willing to share. For a moment, Maya looked like she might deflect the question. Then she seemed to make a decision. We met in graduate school. Brilliant programmer, charming, came from money but acted like he'd rather be judged on merit than family connections. I thought that meant he had integrity. Her voice remained steady, but Khalil could hear the careful control beneath it. We started working together on blockchain protocols during our final year. The chemistry was incredible, both intellectual and personal. By graduation, we were engaged and had our first provisional patent. What changed? Maya was quiet for so long that Khalil wondered if she would answer. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I found out he'd been systematically documenting our work sessions, editing the recordings to make it appear like he was leading all the innovation while I was just following along. He'd been building a case that the intellectual property was primarily his for over a year. Jesus. The patents were filed in both our names, but the supporting documentation told a different story. When our startup began attracting serious investment interest, David used that documentation to convince investors that I was a liability. Brilliant but unstable, prone to taking credit for collaborative work. Khalil felt anger building in his chest. How did he get away with it? Maya's laugh was bitter. He was very good at his job, and I was very good at trusting him. By the time I realized what was happening, he had investors, board members, and even some of our employees convinced that I was delusional. Your own employees? David was charismatic. He made people feel valued, appreciated. When he started suggesting that I was becoming possessive about work that was clearly collaborative, they wanted to believe him. Maya met Khalil's eyes directly. It's amazing how quickly people will accept a narrative that absolves them of having to choose sides. Khalil thought about his own employees, his own board members. How easy would it be for someone with the right skills to manipulate perceptions? Probably easier than he wanted to admit. What happened to the patents? Bought out of my stake for significantly less than market value. The board voted. David abstained, of course, to avoid conflict of interest. Maya's tone was conversational, as if she were discussing the weather. I was given 30 days to accept their offer or face a lengthy legal battle with people who had significantly more resources than a suddenly unemployed computer scientist. You could have fought. With what money? David had made sure I looked unstable and potentially litigious. No law firm wanted to take the case on contingency, and I couldn't afford to pay up front. Maya shrugged. Sometimes the house wins, Mr. Al-Rashid. Khalil studied her face, looking for signs of self-pity or bitterness. Instead, he saw something that looked like hard-won acceptance. You started over, he observed. I tried to, but reputation follows you in tech. David had been very thorough in his character assassination. Every job interview felt like an interrogation about my previous difficulties with collaborative work environments. So you became a janitor. I became invisible, Maya corrected. There's a difference. As a janitor, no one expects brilliance. No one wants to hear your ideas. No one asks about your past or your potential. You just exist in the spaces between other people's important lives. The sadness in her voice was almost unbearable. Khalil found himself wanting to find David and make him pay for every slight, every theft, every moment of doubt he'd planted in Maya's mind. But you're not invisible, Khalil said. Not to me. Maya looked at him for a long moment. Mr. Al-Rashid. Khalil, he corrected. And I mean it. What I saw last night wasn't just technical skill. It was artistry. The way you approach that problem, the elegance of your solution, that's not something you can fake or steal. Khalil, Maya said carefully, and his name sounded different in her voice, warmer, more personal. I appreciate what you're saying, but have dinner with me again tomorrow night, Khalil interrupted. Maya blinked. We're having dinner right now. Different dinner, different restaurant, same conversation but deeper. Khalil leaned forward slightly. I want to know more about how your mind works. I want to understand what drives someone to rebuild their entire life from the ground up. And honestly, I want to spend more time with the most interesting person I've met in years. You barely know me. Then let me fix that. Maya stared at him, and Khalil could practically see her brain working through the implications the risks, the potential complications. Finally, she spoke. This is complicated, Khalil. We come from completely different worlds now. 3 days ago, that might have been true, Khalil said. But yesterday, you made yourself $155 million richer. Which world do you belong to now? Maya considered this. I honestly don't know. Then let's figure it out together. Something shifted in Maya's expression, a crack in the armor she'd built around herself. Okay, she said quietly. One more dinner. Good, Khalil said, and his smile was genuinely warm. Because I have a feeling we're just getting started. As if on cue, Maya's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and froze. What is it? Khalil asked. Maya's face had gone pale. David, she said quietly. He wants to meet. The coffee shop David had chosen was deliberately neutral, a chain establishment in Midtown that suggested neither wealth nor poverty, just carefully calculated anonymity. Maya sat across from the man who had once been her entire world, studying the face she'd once kissed goodnight every evening, searching for any trace of the person she'd thought she'd loved. David looked exactly the same. Perfectly groomed brown hair, expensive but understated clothing, the kind of smile that had once made her feel like she was the only person in the room. Now it made her skin crawl. You look well, Maya, David said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of warm concern that had once comforted her during late-night coding sessions. Really well. Cut the bullshit, David. What do you want? His eyebrows rose in mock surprise. Straight to the point. I always admired that about you. Maya felt her jaw clench. You have 30 minutes before I leave. David leaned back in his chair, studying her with the calculating expression she'd learned to recognize too late. I heard about your recent windfall. $155 million for solving an algorithm. Impressive. The words hit Maya like ice water. How did you hear about that? Maya, you solved a problem that had been stumping Al Rashid Financial for months. Word travels fast in our circles. Our circles, Maya repeated flatly. I clean offices for minimum wage, David. We don't travel in the same circles anymore. Don't you? David's smile took on a predatory edge. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you found yourself a very wealthy patron. Khalil al-Rashid is quite the catch. Maya's blood turned cold. Have you been watching me? I keep tabs on former business associates, David said smoothly. It's just good practice. And imagine my surprise when I discovered that my brilliant former partner was working as a janitor in the very building where one of my potential investors operates. Potential investors? David's smile widened. Al Rashid Financial has been evaluating our latest blockchain innovations for a possible partnership. Fascinating coincidence, don't you think? Maya stared at him, her mind racing through the implications. You orchestrated this. I orchestrated what? You getting a job cleaning his office? You solving his algorithm? You having dinner with him last night? David shook his head with false regret. Maya, you always did have a tendency toward paranoid thinking. The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment Maya felt the familiar doubt creeping in. Then she remembered Khalil's reaction to her solution, the genuine surprise and respect in his eyes. David couldn't have faked that. What do you want? She asked again. David pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. I want you to look at this. The screen showed a contract, dense legal language that Maya's trained eye could parse quickly. It was a non-disclosure and non-compete agreement specifically related to quantum encryption algorithms. This is my signature, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. From our original partnership agreement, David confirmed. Section 15, subsection C. Any innovations related to quantum computing or encryption developed during our professional relationship remain subject to joint intellectual property claims for a period of 5 years post-dissolution. Maya felt the world tilt. I never agreed to that. Your signature suggests otherwise. David's voice remained pleasant, conversational. Of course, at the time, quantum encryption seemed like a distant possibility. We were focused on blockchain protocols. You added this clause after I signed. Prove it. David's smile was razor-sharp now. The document is properly notarized, legally binding, and filed with the appropriate authorities. Any court would uphold it. Maya's hands were shaking now, and she pressed them flat against the table to hide it. Even if this were legitimate, I didn't develop anything for you. I solved Khalil's algorithm independently. Did you? David tilted his head thoughtfully. Because I have documentation suggesting that some of the foundational work you used in that solution was developed during our partnership. Specifically, the temporal variance calculations that made your breakthrough possible. He was right, and they both knew it. The mathematical framework she'd used had been part of theoretical work they'd done together 2 years ago. Work that had seemed purely academic at the time. You can't prove I used that framework. I don't need to prove it, Maya. I just need to suggest it. David leaned forward, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. Think about what happens when Al-Rashid Financial discovers that their brilliant new consultant might be legally obligated to share her innovations with a competitor. Think about how that affects their willingness to work with you. Maya felt sick. Khalil isn't working with me professionally, isn't he? David's eyebrows rose again. Because my sources suggest he offered you a position with his company just yesterday, and the timing of your dinner date certainly suggests a professional relationship with personal benefits. The way he said it made Maya feel dirty. You're disgusting. I'm practical. David's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. You cost me 18 months of development time, Maya. 18 months of having to recreate innovations that were rightfully mine. I'm simply recouping my losses. Those innovations were mine. Prove it, David said again, and the repetition was like a slap. In court, with lawyers, while Al-Rashid Financial watches their potential partner become embroiled in a lengthy intellectual property dispute. Maya stared at him, understanding finally dawning. You want money? I want what's fair. 50% of your recent windfall seems reasonable. $77.5 million as compensation for the foundational work that made your solution possible. And if I refuse? David's smile returned, bright and terrible. Then I file an injunction preventing you from using any algorithms that incorporate shared intellectual property. I leak the story to the tech press about the legal dispute surrounding Al-Rashid's quantum encryption solution. And I make sure every potential employer in the industry knows that working with Maya Chen comes with significant legal risks. The threat was comprehensive and devastating. Even if Maya could eventually prove her case in court, the process would destroy any chance she had of rebuilding her career or her relationship with Khalil. You bastard, she whispered. I'm a businessman, David corrected. And unlike you, I learn from our past mistakes. I don't let emotions cloud my judgment anymore. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message. Khalil's name appeared on the screen. Hope your meeting goes well. Dinner tomorrow still on? The simple message, with its assumption that she was strong enough to handle whatever David threw at her, almost broke her heart. Khalil had no idea what kind of legal and professional nightmare he was about to inherit by association. I need time to think, Maya said. Of course. David stood smoothly, leaving exact change for his coffee on the table. You have 48 hours to transfer the funds. After that, I file the paperwork and contact the press. He paused at her shoulder, his voice dropping to that intimate whisper again. Oh, and Maya? You might want to think carefully about what you tell Al-Rashid about this conversation. Men like him don't appreciate complications, especially complicated women who come with legal baggage. David walked away, leaving Maya alone with the contract and the devastating realization that even her escape from his influence had been incomplete. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Khalil. Actually, why wait? Free for dinner tonight? Maya stared at the screen, her heart breaking. She typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, something's come up. Rain check? The response came immediately. Everything okay? Maya typed yes and immediately deleted it, then no and deleted that too. Finally, she turned off her phone and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving the contract on the table like the poison it was. She had 48 hours to choose between destroying Khalil's trust or destroying her future. Either way, David would win again. Khalil stared at his phone for the 5th time in an hour, willing Maya to respond to his messages. Her sudden coldness after David's meeting felt wrong, not like the confident woman who'd solved his impossible algorithm, or the vulnerable one who'd shared her story over dinner. Something was very wrong. He was still debating whether to respect her space or track her down when Marcus knocked on his office door. "Sir, there's a David Chen here to see you. Says it's about a potential partnership opportunity." Khalil's blood ran cold. Chen, Maya's ex-fiancé, had a different last name, but the timing couldn't be coincidental. "Send him in," Khalil said, his voice carefully neutral. The man who entered his office was everything Maya had described and nothing like what Khalil had expected. Handsome in a clean-cut, unthreatening way, with the kind of practiced charm that set Khalil's business instincts on high alert. "Mr. Al-Rashid," David said, extending his hand with a warm smile. "David Chen, CEO of Chen Innovations. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me." Khalil shook the offered hand, noting the expensive watch and manicured nails. "Mr. Chen, I understand you have a business proposition." "I do. But first I feel I should mention that I know Maya quite well. Personal and professional history." The statement was clearly designed to provoke a reaction. Khalil kept his expression neutral. "Ms. Chen is an associate of mine." "Associate," David repeated thoughtfully. "Interesting way to describe someone you're dating." "My personal life isn't relevant to this meeting," Khalil said coolly. "What exactly are you proposing?" David pulled out a tablet and placed it on Khalil's desk. "I'm proposing that you might want to reconsider your association with Maya before it becomes professionally problematic." The screen showed legal documents, contracts, and what appeared to be development logs. Khalil scanned them quickly, his business law background allowing him to parse the essential elements. "This appears to be an intellectual property dispute," Khalil observed. "More than that. It's documentation proving that the algorithm Maya solved for you incorporates foundational work developed during our partnership, work that remains subject to joint ownership under our original agreement." Khalil studied the documentation more carefully. On the surface, it appeared legitimate, properly notarized, legally formatted, with Maya's signature clearly visible. But something felt off. "You're claiming ownership of Maya's solution?" "I'm claiming ownership of the mathematical framework that made her solution possible," David corrected smoothly. "The temporal variance calculations, the quantum entanglement protocols, all developed during our joint research period." "And you're telling me this because?" David's smile widened. "Because I assume you don't want your company embroiled in a lengthy intellectual property dispute, especially not over technology that might be legally questionable." Khalil leaned back in his chair, studying David with the cold assessment he reserved for hostile negotiations. "What do you want?" "For you? Nothing. This is purely about Maya and our unresolved business relationship." David's tone remained friendly, but his eyes were calculating. "I simply thought you should know what you're getting involved with." "How considerate of you." "I try to be." David collected his tablet and stood. "Of course, if Maya has misrepresented the legal status of her work to you, that could create complications, especially if your company plans to commercialize her algorithm." The threat was subtle but clear. Khalil felt anger building in his chest, not at the legal complications but at the casual way this man was trying to destroy Maya's life again. "Mr. Chen," Khalil said, his voice taking on the dangerous edge that made his board members nervous. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, but I should mention that Al-Rashid Financial has excellent legal counsel. If there are intellectual property concerns, I'm confident we can resolve them appropriately." Something flickered in David's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that his intimidation tactics weren't working as expected. "Of course," David said smoothly. "I just thought you should be aware of the potential complications that come with Maya's involvement in any project." After David left, Khalil sat alone in his office, staring at the legal implications of what he'd just learned. If David's claims were legitimate, Maya's algorithm could indeed be legally problematic. but something about the entire interaction felt wrong. His phone rang. Marcus again. Sir? I have Dr. Elizabeth Warren from MIT on the line. She says it's about Maya Chen and that it's urgent. Khalil took the call immediately. Dr. Warren? Mr. Al-Rashid, I apologize for calling unexpectedly. Maya was one of my brightest students, and I understand she recently solved a significant algorithm for your company. She did. I also understand that her former partner David has contacted you about intellectual property concerns. Khalil's pulse quickened. How did you know that? Because David Chen has spent the last 3 years systematically contacting anyone who showed professional interest in Maya. He uses the same legal documentation, the same intimidation tactics, and the same goal to ensure that Maya remains professionally isolated. The contracts are fake. The contracts are real but incomplete. What David doesn't share is the subsequent documentation that invalidates his claims. Documentation that Maya developed independently after their partnership dissolved, and that clearly establishes her sole ownership of the relevant mathematical frameworks. Dr. Warren's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades in academic intellectual property disputes. Mr. Al-Rashid, David Chen is a brilliant programmer, but Maya is a once-in-a-generation mathematical innovator. What she created for you is entirely her own work. Why hasn't Maya defended herself? Because David is very good at making the legal battle seem costlier than surrender. And because after 3 years of professional sabotage, Maya started believing that maybe she didn't deserve to win. Khalil felt his anger crystallize into something cold and focused. Dr. Warren, would you be willing to provide testimony about the legitimate ownership of Maya's work? I'd be delighted to. In fact, I've been waiting 3 years for someone to finally call David's bluff. After ending the call, Khalil immediately contacted his head legal counsel. Within 2 hours, he had a comprehensive strategy for not only defending Maya's intellectual property rights, but exposing David's pattern of fraudulent intimidation. The sun was setting when he finally drove to Maya's Queens apartment building. She answered her door looking exhausted and defeated, wearing old jeans and an oversized sweater that seemed designed to hide her from the world. Khalil, she said quietly, you shouldn't be here. David came to see me today, Khalil said without preamble. Maya's face went pale. What did he tell you? What? A very convincing story about shared intellectual property and legal complications. Khalil stepped closer. A story that would have worked perfectly if I hadn't also spoken to Dr. Warren from MIT. Maya's eyes widened. Elizabeth called you? She called to warn me about David's pattern of sabotaging your career, and to offer testimony that your algorithm is entirely your own work. Maya stared at him as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. But the contracts are incomplete. The documentation David uses to intimidate people conveniently omits the subsequent agreements that established your independent ownership of the relevant mathematical frameworks. I don't understand. Khalil reached for her hands, noting how cold they were despite the warm apartment. Maya, you've been legally in the right this entire time. David has been committing fraud for 3 years, and no one ever called him on it because his victims couldn't afford to fight back. Maya's legs seemed to give out and she sank onto her couch. That's not possible. It's not only possible, it's documented. My legal team spent this afternoon reviewing your original partnership dissolution. David has no legitimate claim to your work. But the companies that wouldn't hire me were scared off by lies. Khalil sat beside her, wanting to pull her into his arms, but sensing she needed space to process. Maya, David has been systematically destroying your reputation with legal threats he knew he couldn't back up in court. Maya was quiet for so long that Khalil wondered if she'd heard him. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. 3 years. I've spent 3 years believing I deserved what happened to me. You didn't deserve any of it. Maya looked at him, and Khalil saw something breaking open in her expression, not breaking apart but breaking free. What happens now? She asked. Now we destroy him, Khalil said simply. My legal team is filing charges for fraud, defamation, and intentional interference with business relationships. By tomorrow morning, David Chen's career will be over. And us? The question hung in the air between them. Khalil reached for her hand again, this time intertwining their fingers. Us, he said quietly, is entirely up to you. But Maya, I need you to know something. What I feel for you has nothing to do with algorithms or business or solving problems. It has everything to do with the fact that you're the most remarkable woman I've ever met. Maya's eyes filled with tears. Khalil, I've been so scared. For 3 years I've been scared of hoping for anything better. You don't have to be scared anymore, Khalil said, moving closer to her on the couch. I'm not going anywhere. When Maya finally kissed him, it tasted like freedom. 6 months later, Maya stood in the boardroom of Chen Innovations, watching David's former employees pack their belongings into cardboard boxes. The federal investigation had been swift and thorough. Once one victim came forward with proper legal support, dozens of others had emerged from the shadows. Hard to believe it's really over, Doctor, Warren said, joining Maya at the window that overlooked Manhattan's financial district. Sometimes I still wake up expecting it to have been a dream, Maya admitted. Good dreams have been rare the last few years. The older woman smiled. How are things with your young billionaire? Maya's cheeks warmed. Khalil isn't that young, and things are complicated. Complicated how? Last I heard, he'd offered you a position as Chief Innovation Officer with a salary that would make most CEOs weep with envy. He did. Maya sighed. And I turned him down. Dr. Warren's eyebrows rose. Dare I ask why? Because I need to know I can succeed on my own before I build a life with someone else. I spent 3 years believing I was broken. I can't jump from that into depending on Khalil's success to define my worth. And what does Khalil think about this decision? Maya smiled despite herself. He said, and I quote, "That's the most beautifully stubborn thing I've ever heard. When you're ready to take over the tech industry, I'll be here." Sounds like a keeper. He is. Maya's smile widened. Did I mention he helped me secure funding for my own startup? As an investor, not a boyfriend. Very strict boundaries. How's that going? 3 patents filed, 2 major clients signed, and a development team of 12 brilliant women who've all been burned by men like David at some point in their careers. Maya's voice carried a satisfaction that had been absent for years. We're calling it Phoenix Innovations. Perfect name. Maya was about to respond when her phone buzzed with a text from Khalil. Dinner tonight, I have news. She texted back, good news or bad news? Depends on how you feel about marriage proposals. Maya stared at her phone, her heart stopping mid-beat. Dr. Warren, reading over her shoulder, laughed out loud. Well, the older woman said, I'd say that settles the question of whether he's willing to wait. Maya's hands were shaking as she typed, That's not funny. Khalil's response came immediately. Who said I was joking? Dinner at 8? Maya excused herself from Dr. Warren and called Khalil directly. He answered on the first ring. Please tell me you're not actually planning to propose tonight, Maya said without preamble. I'm actually planning to propose right now, Khalil replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. Over the phone seems less romantic, but I'm surprisingly nervous about waiting until dinner. Khalil. Maya Chen, you are the most brilliant, stubborn, incredible woman I've ever known. You've rebuilt your entire life from nothing, created a company that's already changing the industry, and somehow managed to fall in love with a workaholic billionaire who didn't know what happiness was until he met you. Maya felt tears starting to build behind her eyes. You make me want to be better than I am, Khalil continued. You make me laugh, you challenge every assumption I have about the world, and you solve impossible problems before breakfast. I love your sarcasm, your determination, your terrible habit of working until 3 in the morning, and the way you look at me like I'm worth something more than my bank account balance. Khalil, Maya whispered, I'm not asking you to give up your independence or your company or your stubborn refusal to accept help. You don't need. I'm asking you to build something with me that's bigger than either of us could create alone. Maya was crying now, standing in David's former office, surrounded by the ruins of the life he'd tried to build on stolen dreams. So, Khalil said quietly, Maya Chen, will you marry me? You can't propose over the phone, Maya managed through her tears. I can do whatever I want. I'm a billionaire, remember? His tone was teasing, but she could hear the nervous edge underneath. Besides, you still haven't answered the question. Maya wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. Ask me again at dinner. Is that a yes? That's a bring a ring and find out. Khalil's laughter was warm and relieved. Challenge accepted. 8 hours later, Maya sat across from Khalil in the same Italian restaurant where they'd had their first real conversation. He'd chosen their original table, and the familiar setting made everything feel like coming full circle. Nervous? Maya asked, noting how Khalil kept checking his watch. Terrified, he admitted. I've negotiated billion-dollar deals with less anxiety than this. Good, Maya said with a smile. I'd hate to think I was easy. Easy is the last word I'd use to describe you. Khalil reached across the table and took her hand. Ready for your official proposal? Actually, Maya said, I have something to say first. Khalil's expression grew concerned. That sounds ominous. 6 months ago, I was cleaning your office and believing I was worthless, Maya said quietly. You saw something in me that I'd forgotten existed. You didn't just give me money or opportunity. You gave me back my sense of possibility. Maya, I'm not finished. She squeezed his hand. You could have used my desperation to make me dependent on you. Instead, you pushed me to become independent again. You could have made our relationship about gratitude or obligation. Instead, you made it about choice. Maya stood up from her chair and moved around the table, pulling something from her purse as she went. So, before you propose to me, she said, dropping to one knee beside Khalil's chair, I'm proposing to you. Khalil's mouth fell open as Maya opened a small velvet box containing a simple platinum band. Khalil al-Rashid, Maya said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. You are infuriating, generous, brilliant, and absolutely terrible at taking no for an answer. You've made me remember who I was before David, and you've helped me become someone even better. She took a breath. You challenge me, you support me, you make me laugh, and you've never once made me feel like I need to be smaller to make room for your ego. I love your ridiculous dramatic gestures, your terrible habit of throwing money at problems, and the way you look at me like I hung the moon. Maya, Khalil whispered. I'm asking you to build a life with me, Maya continued. Not as my savior or my patron or my business partner, but as my equal, as my best friend, as the person I choose to love for the rest of my life. She held up the ring. So, Khalil al-Rashid, will you marry me? For a moment, Khalil just stared at her. Then he started laughing. Deep, joyful laughter that drew stares from other diners and made Maya's heart sing. Yes, he said, pulling her up from the floor and into his arms. Yes, absolutely. Definitely, yes. As he kissed her, Maya felt the last of her carefully constructed walls finally crumble completely. When they broke apart, Khalil was grinning. Though I should mention, he said, I also brought a ring. Show me, Maya challenged. Khalil pulled out his own small box, revealing a stunning solitaire that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. Maya Chen, he said formally. Will you marry me back? That depends, Maya replied with a grin. Are you prepared for a lifetime of me being right about algorithms? I'm prepared for a lifetime of you being right about everything, Khalil said. As long as you're prepared for a lifetime of me pretending to argue about it. Deal, Maya said and kissed him again. Later, as they walked hand in hand through the city that had witnessed both her downfall and her resurrection, Maya reflected on the strange turns life could take. A year ago, she'd been invisible, broken, convinced that her story was over. Now she was engaged to a man who saw her as she truly was, running a company built on her own terms, surrounded by people who valued her mind and her heart. Any regrets? Khalil asked, as if reading her thoughts. Maya considered the question seriously. About David? About the 3 years? About everything that led me to that office building on the night I met you? About any of it. Maya stopped walking and turned to face him. Not a single one, she said firmly. Because every terrible thing that happened led me to you. And this, us, is worth all of it. Even the part where I was an arrogant ass who challenged a janitor to solve impossible algorithms? Especially that part, Maya said with a laugh. Though for the record, I was never really a janitor. No, I was a brilliant woman waiting for the right moment to remind the world who she was. So Maya stood on her tiptoes to kiss him one more time. Thank you for being my moment, Khalil al-Rashid. Thank you for being mine, Maya Chen. As they walked home together, planning a wedding and a future that neither of them could have imagined 6 months earlier, Maya realized that sometimes the best love stories begin with the ending of everything you thought you wanted. Sometimes you have to lose yourself completely to discover who you were meant to become. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find someone who sees your potential even when you've forgotten it exists. Someone who doesn't save you, but stands beside you while you save yourself. Maya squeezed Khalil's hand and smiled at the city lights ahead of them, ready for whatever impossible challenges tomorrow might bring.
The billionaire's deal was just seconds away from being approved, but the shy waitress suddenly spoke up, revealing the hidden Arab trap in the contract. Subscribe now or the algorithm might separate us forever. Like, comment and share to stay connected. Let's begin our story. The mahogany conference table gleamed under crystal chandeliers as Marcus Sterling reviewed the most important contract of his 28-year life. Sterling Tech's Manhattan headquarters buzzed with anticipation. This deal with the Al-Zahra investment group could transform his artificial intelligence startup into a global powerhouse worth $12 billion. The Arab investors are offering unprecedented terms, announced his business partner David Chen, sliding documents across polished wood. Full funding for our military AI contracts, plus international expansion rights. It's everything we've dreamed of. Marcus studied the Arabic and English text, his steel-grey eyes scanning numbers that represented 5 years of 18-hour days and sleepless nights. At 28, he'd already revolutionized predictive AI technology, but this partnership would make him one of the youngest tech billionaires in America. Sheikh Omar Al-Zahra specifically requested today's signing, David continued. His plane leaves for Dubai tonight, so we need final approval within the hour. The conference room door opened quietly, and Elena Martinez entered with practiced invisibility. She'd perfected the art of being unnoticed during her 8-month serving Sterling Tech's executive meetings, moving like a shadow in her black server's uniform. Her dark hair was pulled back professionally, and she kept her eyes downcast as she arranged the afternoon refreshments. Marcus barely glanced up from the contract. Coffee, Elena. And make sure those pastries are fresh. We're hosting some very important people today. Elena's movements faltered slightly as she caught sight of the contract's header. Her fluency in Arabic, gained from years working in international finance, allowed her to read the document title that made her blood run cold. She continued arranging items with steady hands, but her mind raced. "Of course, Mr. Sterling," she replied softly, her voice carrying the faintest trace of an accent that most people assumed was Mexican rather than the result of her multilingual education. As she poured coffee, Eleanor positioned herself to overhear David's phone conversation with their legal team. Her ability to understand Mandarin, Arabic, French, German, Spanish and English had proven invaluable in her previous career, and now it might save Marcus from making the biggest mistake of his life. "The contracts look standard," David was saying in Mandarin to their Chinese-American lawyer, assuming privacy. "But I want you to review paragraph 12. 3 once more. Something about the subsidiary clauses feels." Elena's heart stopped. Paragraph 12. 3 was exactly what she'd been worried about when she saw the Arabic header. She'd seen identical language destroy other American companies. "Careful with that coffee," Marcus said sharply as Elena's hand trembled slightly. "These documents are irreplaceable." Elena steadied herself, meeting his gaze directly for the first time in months. "My apologies, Mr. Sterling. The contracts appear quite complex." Something in her tone made Marcus pause. Elena had served hundreds of meetings, always silent and efficient. Why was she making conversation now? "They're fairly straightforward," Marcus replied, studying her face. Standard international investment agreements. Elena finished pouring coffee, her mind working frantically. She needed to warn him. But how could a simple garçonette possibly know enough about international law to identify contract fraud? "Will the Arab investors be joining you soon?" she asked carefully. David checked his watch. "Sheikh Omar's team should arrive any moment. This is the biggest deal in Sterling Tech's history." Elena nodded, moving to arrange documents on the side table. As she organized papers, she deliberately positioned herself near David's phone when it rang again. "Wei?" David answered in Mandarin, then switched to Arabic when he recognized the caller. "Nayam Sheikh Omar?" Elena continued her tasks while listening intently. Sheikh Omar was explaining something about the American technology transfer protocols and ensuring complete subsidiary control. Her blood turned to ice as she understood the true meaning behind the corporate jargon. "Is there anything else?" she asked Marcus, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. Marcus was absorbed in reviewing figures with David. "Just keep the coffee fresh. This meeting could run for hours." As Elena moved toward the door, David's phone conversation shifted to French, discussing les clauses de transfert technologique with someone who was clearly coordinating the legal aspects of the deal. The pieces clicked together in her mind with terrifying clarity. "Mr. Sterling," she said quietly, "perhaps you should have your legal team pay special attention to the subsidiary transfer clauses in paragraph 12. 3. The room fell silent. David's eyebrows shot up, and Marcus turned to stare at her with surprise. "Excuse me?" Marcus's voice carried curiosity rather than anger. "What do you know about contract law?" Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. "I simply noticed that the Arabic text in that section doesn't exactly match the English translation. Small discrepancies can sometimes be significant." The audacity of it hung in the air. Marcus rose from his chair, all 6 feet of him radiating the confident authority that had built his company. "You read Arabic?" "Among other languages," Elena admitted, her facade of simple efficiency cracking slightly. "I couldn't help but notice some concerning terminology while serving your previous meetings." Marcus felt the world shift slightly. The quiet waitress who'd been invisible for months had just revealed linguistic skills that could impact a $12 billion deal. "What kind of concerning terminology?" he asked, his business instincts suddenly sharp and focused. Elena glanced at David, who was watching her with undisguised suspicion, then back at Marcus. "The kind that suggests your technology patents would be transferred to Middle Eastern subsidiaries under creative interpretations of international law." David's phone buzzed with an urgent text. He glanced at it and paled. "Marcus, Sheikh Omar is in the lobby with his legal team. They're ready to finalize everything now." Marcus looked between the contract, David's worried expression, and Eleanor's composed face. "David, give us 5 minutes." "But Marcus, they're expecting—" "5 minutes." After David reluctantly left, Marcus circled the table to face Elena directly. "Tell me exactly what you think you discovered." Elena took a deep breath, knowing her next words would either save his company or destroy her carefully constructed new life. Paragraph 12. 3 allows Al-Zahra Investment Group to transfer your AI patents to subsidiary companies in countries that don't recognize American intellectual property protections. Once transferred, they can manufacture and sell your technology without paying you another cent. Marcus felt cold dread creeping up his spine. "And you know this how?" "Because I've seen this exact contract language before," Elena said quietly. "It was used to destroy 3 American tech companies in the past 2 years. The victims thought they were getting investment partners. Instead, they got robbed legally." "Who are you?" Marcus demanded, studying her with new intensity. Elena met his gaze steadily. Someone who knows that in about 10 minutes, Sheikh Omar Al-Zara is going to offer you everything you've ever wanted. And I might be the only person in this building who understands what he's really taking in return. Marcus Sterling stared at Elena, his analytical mind racing through possibilities. You're telling me that the most prestigious investment group in the Middle East is planning to steal my company? I'm telling you to read paragraph 12(3) very carefully, Elena replied, moving to the contract and pointing to specific lines. This clause here in Arabic translates to irrevocable technology transfer upon subsidiary activation. But the English version says collaborative technology sharing for mutual benefit. Marcus leaned over the document, acutely aware of Elena's proximity and the subtle scent of her perfume. The English sounds harmless. That's the point. In international law, Arabic takes precedence in Middle Eastern courts when there's a translation dispute. If they activate subsidiaries in Qatar or Saudi Arabia, your patents transfer immediately and permanently. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. They're using semantic manipulation to commit legal theft. Exactly. And once they have your military AI technology, they can sell it to hostile governments while you face prosecution for technology leaks you never authorized. Marcus straightened, studying Eleanor with growing amazement and attraction. The shy waitress had vanished, replaced by someone who clearly understood complex international law. How do you know so much about corporate espionage? Elena hesitated, clearly weighing how much to reveal. I used to work in international mergers and acquisitions. Before, circumstances forced me to start over. What kind of circumstances? The kind that involved discovering your own firm was facilitating exactly these types of fraudulent deals. Marcus felt pieces clicking together. You were a lawyer, corporate attorney specializing in international technology transfers. I also have an MBA in global finance and speak 6 languages fluently. Elena's professional mask slipped slightly. I was very good at my job until I realized what my job actually was. The conference room door opened and David returned looking frazzled. Marcus, Sheikh Omar is getting impatient. His legal team wants to begin the signing ceremony immediately. Marcus glanced at Elena, then back at David. Tell them we need 30 more minutes for final review. 30 minutes? David's voice pitched higher. They've been planning this for months. If we delay now, then they'll wait, Marcus said firmly. Or they'll leave. Either way, we're not signing anything until our legal team reviews every translation. David shot Elena a suspicious look. Marcus, what's going on? You were ready to sign an hour ago. An hour ago, I didn't know there were translation discrepancies in the contract. Translation discrepancies? David's confusion was obvious. The Al-Zara Group provided certified translations. Their reputation is impeccable. Elena stepped forward slightly. Mr. Chen, have you personally verified the Arabic translations, or are you relying on their certified versions? David's face flushed with irritation. I don't speak Arabic. That's why we use certified translators. Who provided the certified translators? Elena asked quietly. The Al-Zara Group, naturally. They have their own legal team for... David stopped mid-sentence as the implications dawned on him. Marcus felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. They provided their own translators for a contract that benefits them? That's standard practice in international deals, David said weakly. Elena's expression remained neutral, but Marcus caught the flicker of sympathy in her eyes. It's standard when all parties trust each other completely. Less standard when billions of dollars are at stake. Marcus's phone buzzed with an urgent call from his head of legal. He answered quickly, speaking in rapid English, while Elena listened with obvious understanding. Sarah, I need you to bring an independent Arabic translator to the office immediately. Yes, I know Sheikh Omar is waiting. No, We're not signing anything until every word is verified by our own people." He hung up and found Elena watching him with something that looked like approval. "You're taking a significant risk," she said. "If Al-Zahra Group is legitimate, they'll be insulted by your lack of trust. And if they're not legitimate, then you just saved your company and possibly your life." David ran his hands through his hair nervously. "Marcus, this is insane. The Al-Zahra Group has invested in dozens of American companies successfully. Why would they suddenly start committing fraud?" Elena and Marcus exchanged glances. "David," Marcus said carefully, "which companies has Al-Zahra invested in recently?" "TechFlow Solutions, Quantum Dynamics, and Advanced AI Systems," David rattled off proudly. "All successful partnerships." Elena's face went pale. "Mr. Chen, you might want to check the current status of those companies." "What do you mean?" "I mean call their CEOs and ask how their partnerships are working out." David's confident expression wavered. He pulled out his phone and dialed TechFlow's main number. After several minutes of transfers and holds, his face went white. "TechFlow Solutions filed for bankruptcy 3 months ago," he whispered. "Their CEO says Al-Zahra activated subsidiary clauses and transferred all their patents to Qatar-based companies." The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus felt a mixture of rage and gratitude as he realized how close he'd come to destroying everything he'd built. "Elena," he said quietly, "you just saved my company." "Not yet," she replied. "Sheikh Omar's team is still here, and they're not going to leave quietly when they realize their plan failed. Men who orchestrate $12 billion frauds don't typically accept defeat gracefully." Marcus moved closer to her, drawn by her intelligence and the undeniable chemistry sparking between them. "What do you suggest?" Elena's eyes met his, and he saw calculation mixed with something warmer. "We need to document everything and contact the FBI before they can destroy evidence. But first, you need to decide if you trust me enough to let me help you catch them." "Why would you want to help me?" Elena's professional composure cracked slightly, revealing vulnerability underneath. "Because watching you work these past months, I've seen that you're one of the few CEOs who actually cares about your employees and your country. You don't deserve to be destroyed by people like Sheikh Omar." Marcus stared at her, seeing her clearly for the first time. The simple uniform couldn't hide her intelligence or the elegant strength in her bearing. "Who are you really, Elena?" Before she could answer, the conference room door burst open. Sheikh Omar Al-Zahra entered with 3 men in expensive suits, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Mr. Sterling," Sheikh Omar said smoothly, "I hope you're ready to make history. My legal team is eager to finalize our partnership." Marcus felt Elena tense beside him. The game was about to begin, and everything depended on how well they could play it. Sheikh Omar Al-Zahra commanded attention the moment he entered the room. Tall and distinguished, with silver threading through his black hair, he moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to closing billion-dollar deals. His entourage included 2 lawyers and a man who was clearly security, though he wore the same expensive suit as the others. "Sheikh Omar," Marcus stepped forward, extending his hand while acutely aware of Elena's presence behind him. "Thank you for your patience with our final review process." "Of course," Omar replied, his handshake firm and his English accent impeccable. "Due diligence is the mark of a careful businessman. I trust everything meets your satisfaction?" Marcus glanced meaningfully at Elena, who had seamlessly returned to her role as invisible staff, arranging papers at the side table. "Actually, we've discovered some questions about the translation accuracy in certain clauses." Omar's smile remained fixed, but Marcus caught the micro-expression of irritation that flashed across his face. "Translation questions? I assure you, our legal team employs only the most qualified certified translators." "I'm sure they do," Marcus replied smoothly. However, our legal counsel insists on independent verification for all foreign language contracts. Company policy. Elena moved closer to the refreshment table, positioning herself where she could overhear while appearing to focus on her duties. Her heart raced as she recognized the subtle shift in Omar's demeanor, the predator realizing his prey might not be as helpless as expected. "Perhaps we could address specific concerns," suggested Dr. Khalil Mansour, Omar's lead lawyer. "I personally oversaw every translation to ensure absolute accuracy." David, still shaken by his conversation with TechFlow Solutions, spoke up nervously. "We're particularly interested in paragraph 12, 3 regarding subsidiary technology transfers." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Elena watched Omar's reflection in the polished conference table surface, noting how his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Ah, yes," Omar said carefully. "The collaborative technology sharing provisions, quite standard for international partnerships of this scope." Elena's phone, set to silent mode, buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it discreetly and felt her blood run cold. The message was in Arabic. "The woman is listening. Eliminate the problem." Moving with practiced stealth, Elena slipped the phone back into her pocket and continued arranging documents. But her mind raced. Someone in Omar's team had noticed her unusual attention to their conversation. Marcus, meanwhile, was studying the contract with new eyes. "Sheikh Omar, this clause about irrevocable technology transfer upon subsidiary activation, could you explain how that differs from the English version about collaborative sharing?" The silence stretched for several heartbeats too long. Omar's lawyers exchanged glances that Elena recognized as silent communication between conspirators. "I believe there may be some confusion about technical legal terminology," Dr. Mansour said smoothly. "Perhaps if we reviewed the documents together." "That won't be necessary," Marcus interrupted. "Our independent translator should arrive within the hour. We can clarify everything then." Omar's mask of polite patience began to slip. "Mr. Sterling, surely you understand that my schedule is quite demanding. Delaying this signing could complicate our timeline significantly." Elena felt the walls closing in. Omar's security man had positioned himself near the door, and she noticed him speaking quietly into a nearly invisible earpiece. Whatever was happening, it was escalating beyond contract negotiations. "Marcus," David whispered urgently, "maybe we should consider—" The conference room phone rang, interrupting David mid-sentence. Marcus answered with a sharp "Sterling." Elena couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Marcus's face go pale as he listened. After a moment, he hung up and looked directly at Omar. "That was the FBI," Marcus said quietly. "They're investigating reports of corporate espionage involving technology transfers to Middle Eastern subsidiaries. Apparently, several American companies have filed complaints about fraudulent investment schemes." The mask finally dropped from Omar's face completely. "Mr. Sterling, I hope you're not suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything," Marcus replied. "I'm simply informing you that federal agents will be here within 30 minutes to examine all contracts and documentation related to our potential partnership." Elena saw Omar's security man touch his earpiece again and speak in rapid Arabic. "Execute contingency plan 3. Eliminate all witnesses." Her blood turned to ice. These weren't just white-collar criminals. They were prepared to use violence to protect their operation. Moving with careful precision, Elena approached Marcus under the pretense of refilling his coffee. As she leaned close to pour, she whispered in barely audible Spanish, "Están armados, planean matarnos." "They're armed. They plan to kill us." Marcus's hand stilled on his coffee cup, but he gave no other sign he'd heard her warning. Instead, he looked up at Omar with a businessman's smile. While we wait for the federal agents, perhaps we could discuss your other successful American partnerships. Omar's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Well, David mentioned tech flow solutions, quantum dynamics, and advanced AI systems. I'd love to hear about their experiences with the Al-Zahra Group. Elena continued serving coffee while watching the security man's hand drift toward his jacket. She needed to warn Marcus more explicitly, but with Omar's team monitoring every movement, one wrong word could trigger violence immediately. Instead, she deliberately knocked over the sugar bowl, sending packets scattering across the conference table and onto the floor. As everyone's attention focused on the clumsy accident, she caught Marcus's eye and mouthed silently, "Gun." Marcus's training in crisis management kicked in. Without changing his expression, he pressed the building's security alert button hidden beneath the conference table. "I'm so sorry," Elena said loudly, kneeling to collect the scattered sugar packets. "How clumsy of me." "Perhaps," Omar said, his voice carrying new menace, "we should conclude our business more privately, away from unnecessary distractions." Elena felt the security man's attention focus on her like a laser. She'd been identified as a threat, and Omar's team was preparing to eliminate everyone who could expose their operation. Marcus stood slowly, projecting calm authority while his mind raced through escape scenarios. "Gentlemen, I think it's best if we wait for federal agents to arrive. I'm sure they'll be very interested in hearing about your innovative partnership structures." Omar's smile turned predatory. "Mr. Sterling, I'm afraid federal agents won't be arriving today. You see, some situations require more direct solutions." "Don't." The security man's hand moved inside his jacket just as the conference room doors burst open. 3 FBI agents in tactical gear flooded in, weapons drawn. "Federal agents, nobody move!" Elena collapsed against the conference table in relief as Omar's team realized their elaborate scheme had crumbled. But as handcuffs clicked around Omar's wrists, she caught the Sheikh's final words, spoken in Arabic with chilling precision. "Find Elena al-Rashid. This isn't over." Her blood froze as she realized her carefully constructed identity had been blown. Omar knew exactly who she was and why she'd been able to expose his plans so effectively. Marcus was beside her instantly, his hand steady on her arm. "Elena, are you all right?" She looked up at him, seeing concern and something deeper in his grey eyes. "Marcus, there's something else I need to tell you, about why I really knew so much about their operation." "Later," he said firmly. "Right now, we're both safe. That's what matters." But Elena knew their safety was temporary. Omar's network was vast, and his threat had been very specific. The shy waitress named Elena Martinez was about to disappear forever. The question was whether Elena al-Rashid would survive what came next. The FBI safe house in Queens felt like a fortress and a prison simultaneously. Marcus Sterling paced the hardwood floors, while Elena sat at the kitchen table, translating documents the federal agents had seized from Omar's hotel suite. 3 days had passed since the conference room confrontation, and the investigation was revealing the true scope of the Al-Zahra Group's operation. "They've stolen technology from 17 American companies in the past 4 years, Agent Sarah Martinez announced, entering with fresh coffee and manila folders. "Your quick thinking saved not just Sterling Tech, but potentially prevented a massive security breach affecting military AI systems." Marcus glanced at Elena, who looked exhausted despite her composed exterior. "What about Omar's threat? Are we safe here?" "The Al-Zahra Group is more than just corporate espionage," Agent Martinez replied grimly. "We've discovered connections to arms trafficking and technology sales to hostile governments. Sheikh Omar won't give up easily, especially since Elena can identify key players in their network." Elena looked up from the documents, her dark eyes reflecting strain. "There's something else you need to know. Omar called me Elena al-Rashid for a reason." Marcus felt his world shift again. Al-Rashid, that's not your real name either. It's my birth name, Elena said quietly. Elena Al-Rashid was a prominent international lawyer until she discovered her own firm was facilitating these technology thefts. When I tried to expose them, they destroyed my career and threatened my life. Elena Martinez was my witness protection identity. Agent Martinez leaned forward. Elena, we need you to explain exactly what you discovered about your former firm. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she reached for a folder. Khalil and Associates wasn't just providing legal services to the Al-Zahra Group. We were creating the fraudulent contracts, establishing the subsidiary companies, and facilitating the technology transfers. I spent 3 years unknowingly helping them steal billions in American intellectual property. Marcus sat beside her, drawn by her obvious pain. When did you realize what was happening? 18 months ago, I was reviewing contracts for a client called Quantum Dynamics. The subsidiary transfer clauses were identical to ones I'd drafted for other clients, but the technology being transferred was military-grade encryption software. Eleanor's voice grew steadier as she spoke. I started investigating and discovered that every contract I'd worked on had resulted in American companies losing their most valuable assets. What did you do? Agent Martinez asked. I copied everything, contracts, email communications, bank transfer records. Then I confronted my boss, Dr. Khalil Mansour. Elena's laugh was bitter. He offered me a promotion and $1 million bonus to forget what I'd discovered. Marcus felt rage building in his chest. They tried to buy your silence. When I refused, they tried intimidation. When that failed, they tried to have me killed. Eleanor met Marcus's eyes, and he saw the fear she'd been hiding. A car bomb destroyed my apartment in Geneva. If I hadn't been working late at the office, I would have died. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the safe house's security systems. Marcus reached for Elena's hand without thinking, surprised when she didn't pull away. The Witness Protection Program gave me a new identity and relocated me to New York, Elena continued. But I couldn't stop thinking about all the American companies being destroyed by contracts I'd helped create. When I discovered Omar was targeting Sterling Tech, I knew I had to act. Agent Martinez studied Elena with professional interest. You risked everything to save a company you'd never worked for. Elena's eyes found Marcus's again. I risked everything to save a man who didn't deserve to be destroyed by my mistakes. The intensity in her voice made Marcus's pulse quicken. Despite everything, the danger, the deception, the impossible circumstances, he was falling for this brilliant, courageous woman who'd sacrificed her safety to protect his dream. Elena, he said softly, you saved my company and possibly my life. You don't owe me anything. Don't I? She turned to face him fully. I helped create the weapons they used against you. Every fraudulent contract, every stolen patent, every destroyed American business. I made that possible. Marcus squeezed her hand gently. You also made it possible to stop them. Agent Martinez's radio crackled with urgent communication. After a brief conversation, she turned back to them with a grim expression. We've got a problem. Omar made bail through diplomatic channels. He's officially been declared persona non grata and ordered to leave the country, but, Marcus prompted. But 3 of his associates are still in New York, and we've intercepted communications suggesting they plan to eliminate Elena before leaving. Elena went pale. How long do we have? Our surveillance suggests they've located this safe house. We need to move you both immediately. Marcus stood, pulling Elena to her feet. Where? There's a secure federal facility upstate. You'll be completely protected until we can... The lights went out. In the darkness, Marcus heard Agent Martinez curse and reach for her radio. All units, we have a breach at the safe house. Repeat, we have a hostile breach. Elena's hand found Marcus's in the darkness, her fingers intertwining with his. "Marcus, if something happens to me, you need to know—" "Nothing's going to happen to you," he said fiercely, pulling her closer. The sound of breaking glass came from the front of the house, followed by shouted commands in Arabic. Agent Martinez pushed them toward the back exit, her weapon drawn. "Move! Now!" Marcus wrapped his arm around Elena's waist, guiding her through the dark hallway toward the rear of the house. Behind them, he could hear multiple voices coordinating a systematic search. "The garage," Agent Martinez whispered. "There's an armored vehicle. We can—" A gunshot echoed through the house, and Agent Martinez stumbled. Elena caught her arm, steadying her as blood spread across the agent's shoulder. "I'm fine," Martinez gasped. "Keep moving." Marcus felt Elena's body trembling against his, but her voice remained steady. "There's a window in the laundry room. We can reach the neighbor's yard." "How do you know that?" "I memorized every exit the first day we arrived." Even in mortal danger, Elena's intelligence amazed him. Marcus helped Agent Martinez, while Elena led them through the dark house with confident precision. Behind them, the voices grew closer. They reached the laundry room just as flashlight beams began sweeping the hallway behind them. Elena quietly opened the window, while Marcus helped the wounded agent. "You first," Elena whispered to Martinez. "No, you're the primary target. Go." Elena hesitated, clearly torn between self-preservation and protecting the injured agent. Marcus made the decision for her, lifting her toward the window. "I'm not losing you," he said quietly. "Not after everything we've been through." As Elena slipped through the window, their eyes met in the dim light filtering from outside. In that moment, Marcus realized that somewhere between corporate espionage and federal safe houses, he'd fallen completely in love with her. "Marcus," she whispered urgently from outside. "Hurry." He helped Agent Martinez through the window, then followed just as footsteps reached the laundry room. They ran across the neighbor's yard, staying low and moving toward the street where backup federal vehicles were arriving, with sirens wailing. But as they reached safety, Marcus caught Elena's expression in the flashing emergency lights. She looked relieved but also resigned, like someone preparing for an inevitable goodbye. "Elena, what is it?" She turned to him with tears in her eyes. "Marcus, there's something else, something that changes everything between us." The federal courthouse in Manhattan buzzed with activity as Elena prepared to testify before a grand jury investigating the Al-Zahra Group's international fraud network. Marcus sat in the witness waiting area, watching her review her notes with the focused intensity he'd come to admire and love over the past week. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly, moving to sit beside her. "Agent Martinez said they have enough evidence from the documents to proceed without your testimony." Elena looked up from her legal pad, her dark eyes reflecting determination mixed with fear. "Marcus, without my testimony explaining how the contracts were structured, they might only get convictions for fraud. With my testimony, they can prove conspiracy to commit espionage and technology theft. The difference is 5 years versus life sentences." Marcus reached for her hand, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. "And the difference for you is continued witness protection versus having your real identity exposed to every news outlet in the country. I know the risks. Do you?" Marcus studied her face, seeing the woman he'd fallen in love with beneath the brave exterior. "Once you testify as Elena Al-Rashid, former attorney for Khalil and Associates, your life as Elena Martinez disappears forever. Omar's associates will spend the rest of their lives trying to find you." Elena's smile was sad but resolute. "My life as Elena Martinez was never real anyway. It was just borrowed time." Before Marcus could respond, the door opened and Dr. Khalil Mansour entered in handcuffs, flanked by federal marshals. The man who had once been Elena's boss and mentor looked older and smaller than Marcus had expected, but his eyes burned with hatred when they fixed on Elena. Elena al-Rashid, Khalil said in accented English, his voice carrying old affection twisted into malice. My most promising student. I taught you everything you knew about international law, and this is how you repay me. Eleanor stood, facing the man who had destroyed her life with dignity that took Marcus's breath away. You taught me to recognize justice, Dr. Mansour. I'm simply practicing what you preached before you forgot your own principles. Khalil's laugh was bitter. Principles? Elena, we were making millions while helping developing nations access technology that American companies hoarded selfishly. We were leveling the playing field. We were stealing, Elena replied firmly, and you know it. I know that you were living in a penthouse apartment in Geneva, driving a Maserati, and earning more money than most people see in a lifetime. All of that disappeared the moment you decided to develop a conscience. Marcus felt rage building as he watched Khalil try to manipulate Elena with reminders of her former lifestyle. But Elena's response surprised them both. You're right, she said calmly. I had everything money could buy, but I didn't have the ability to sleep at night, knowing that my legal expertise was being used to destroy innocent people's dreams. She gestured toward Marcus. Do you know what Marcus Sterling was doing the night before you planned to steal his company? He was in his office at 2 a.m., personally reviewing employee benefit packages to make sure his staff could afford their children's medical care. This is the man you wanted to destroy for profit. Khalil's eyes shifted to Marcus with cold assessment. Ah, yes, the idealistic young American. Tell me, Mr. Sterling, are you prepared for what loving Elena al-Rashid will cost you? Marcus stepped closer to Elena, putting his arm around her protectively. I'm prepared for anything. Are you prepared for the fact that she's worth approximately $400 million? The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Elena's face went white, and she turned to stare at Khalil with horror. What did you just say? Marcus asked quietly. Khalil smiled with malicious satisfaction. Didn't she tell you? Elena al-Rashid isn't just a brilliant attorney. She's the sole heir to the al-Rashid shipping fortune. Her father's business empire is worth nearly $500 million, all of it sitting in Swiss accounts, waiting for her to claim it. Marcus felt the floor shift beneath his feet. Elena? Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. Marcus, I can explain. The only reason she was working for our firm, Khalil continued, clearly enjoying their shock, was because her father wanted her to understand international business before inheriting his empire. She was never a regular employee. She was an heiress playing at being a lawyer. Marcus stepped back slightly, his mind reeling. You're a billionaire. I was supposed to be, Elena said, tears forming in her eyes. But when I discovered what Khalil's firm was really doing, I couldn't claim money that had been earned through association with criminals. I've been living on witness protection stipends because I refused to access funds that might be connected to stolen technology. The complexity of her sacrifice hit Marcus like a tidal wave. She hadn't just given up her career and safety, she'd given up a fortune to expose the truth. Elena, he said softly, why didn't you tell me? Because I knew how you'd react, she replied, her voice breaking. You built your company from nothing. You're proud of earning everything yourself. How could I tell you that I was born into wealth beyond anything you've achieved? Khalil laughed cruelly. She's right to worry, Mr. Sterling. Can your masculine pride handle being with a woman who could buy your little company 12 times over? Marcus felt anger surge through him, not at Elena, but at Khalil's attempt to destroy what they'd built together. Dr. Mansour, you clearly don't understand what kind of man Elena chose to love. He turned to Elena, cupping her face in his hands. Do you really think I care about money? Elena, you gave up $400 million to save my company and countless others. You're the most selfless, courageous person I've ever met. But the difference between us, Elena began. The difference between us, Marcus interrupted, is that you're better than me in every way that matters. You're smarter, braver, and more principled. If anything, I should be worried about whether I'm good enough for you. Elena's tears spilled over as she saw the sincerity in his eyes. Marcus, I love you. But my money, my family's business, it complicates everything. No, Marcus said firmly, pulling her closer. It doesn't complicate anything. We'll figure it out together. The federal marshals began moving Khalil toward the door, but he called back one final threat. Elena, claiming your inheritance means revealing your location to every one of Omar's associates worldwide. Your father's fortune comes with a target on your back. As the door closed behind Khalil, Elena collapsed against Marcus, overwhelmed by the weight of decisions that would define the rest of their lives. Marcus, she whispered, what if he's right? What if loving me puts you in constant danger? Marcus held her tightly, breathing in the scent of her hair and feeling the rightness of her in his arms. Elena, I've been in danger since the moment I met you, danger of falling completely in love with someone I can't live without. She pulled back to look at him, hope and fear warring in her expression. What are we going to do? Marcus smiled, the businessman in him already forming plans. We're going to testify, put these criminals away forever, and then we're going to build something beautiful together. Your money, my company, our future. We'll figure out the details as we go. And if Omar's network comes after us, then they'll discover that protecting the woman I love is something I'm very, very good at. As Elena smiled through her tears, Marcus realized that every challenge they'd faced had only made him more certain of one thing. Elena al-Rashid was worth fighting for, regardless of the consequences. 6 months later, the Sterling Foundation's inaugural gala filled the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel with New York's most influential business leaders, philanthropists, and technology innovators. Marcus Sterling stood at the podium, looking out at an audience that included FBI Director Chen, several federal judges who had presided over the Al-Zahra Group trials, and dozens of CEOs whose companies had been saved by Elena's courageous testimony. Tonight, we celebrate not just the launch of the Sterling Foundation's Global Education Initiative, Marcus began, his voice carrying easily through the elegant space, but the power of one person's courage to change the world. In the front row, Elena sat at a table with Agent Martinez, who had recovered fully from her gunshot wound and been promoted to head the FBI's International Corporate Crimes Division. Elena wore an elegant navy gown that Marcus had chosen specifically because it matched her eyes, and she looked every inch the successful businesswoman she'd always been beneath her disguises. The Sterling Foundation's mission is simple, Marcus continued. We provide technology, education, and resources to developing nations through legitimate partnerships that respect intellectual property and foster genuine economic growth. We believe that innovation should lift everyone up, not tear anyone down. The applause was thunderous, but Marcus only had eyes for Eleanor. Over the past 6 months, they'd worked together to transform both Sterling Tech and Elena's inherited shipping empire into forces for positive change. The Al-Rashid Shipping Company now focused exclusively on humanitarian aid transport, while Sterling Tech had become a leader in ethical international technology transfer. But none of this would have been possible, Marcus said, his voice growing warmer, without the woman who taught me that true strength isn't about building walls around your success. It's about using your success to build bridges for others. Elena's cheeks flushed as the audience's attention turned to her. She'd never fully adjusted to public recognition after years of hiding, but Marcus loved watching her grow more confident in her own skin. Elena al-Rashid, Marcus continued, former attorney, whistleblower, heiress, and the woman who saved not just my company, but my understanding of what it means to be truly successful." The applause grew louder, and Elena smiled the brilliant, unguarded smile that Marcus had fallen in love with during their first conversation about fraudulent contracts. "Elena," Marcus said, his carefully prepared speech forgotten as he looked at the woman who'd changed his life, "would you join me up here?" Elena's eyes widened in surprise, but she rose gracefully and made her way to the podium. When she reached Marcus, he took her hands in his, marveling at how perfectly they fit together. "6 months ago," Marcus said, speaking now to Elena rather than the audience, "I thought I knew what I wanted from life. Success, wealth, recognition, all the things that look impressive on paper." Elena's eyes sparkled with unshed tears as she realized what was happening. "But you taught me that real success isn't about what you achieve, it's about who you become in the process of achieving it. You made me a better man, a better leader, and a better human being." Marcus released one of her hands to reach into his jacket pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box that made several audience members gasp with delight. "Elena Al-Rashid," he said, dropping to one knee as gasps and applause filled the ballroom. "You saved my company, exposed international criminals, and sacrificed everything for justice. But most importantly, you showed me what it means to love someone completely and without reservation." Elena's tears spilled over as Marcus opened the box to reveal a stunning emerald engagement ring surrounded by diamonds. "Will you marry me?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. "Will you build this crazy, beautiful, complicated life with me?" Eleanor looked down at the man who'd stood by her through federal investigations, death threats, and the revelation of her hidden fortune. The man who'd never once made her feel like her money was more important than her heart. "Marcus Sterling," she said, her voice shaking with emotion and joy, "you are the most stubborn, brilliant, protective man I've ever met. You challenged me to be brave when I wanted to hide, and you loved me when I couldn't love myself." The audience held its breath as Elena paused, her smile growing radiant. "Yes," she said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll build this beautiful life with you. And yes, I'll spend the rest of my life showing you that the smartest thing you ever did was trust a waitress who spoke too many languages for her own good." The ballroom erupted in applause as Marcus slipped the ring onto Elena's finger and stood to kiss her properly. As their lips met, Elena whispered against his mouth, "You realize this means you're stuck with me and my $400 million, right?" Marcus laughed, pulling her closer. "Elena Al-Rashid Sterling has a nice ring to it. And just think of all the good we can do with $800 million and 2 companies. $800 million? Eleanor asked in surprise. "Sterling Tech's IPO went through this morning," Marcus said with a grin. "Apparently, successfully fighting international corporate espionage is very good for business." Elena's laugh was pure joy as she kissed him again, not caring that 800 people were watching them with delight. Later, as they danced to their first song as an engaged couple, Elena looked up at Marcus with the mischievous expression that never failed to make his heart race. "You know," she said softly, "there's something else I should probably tell you before we get married." Marcus's eyebrows rose in mock alarm. "Please tell me you're not secretly related to any other international crime families." "Nothing that dramatic," Eleanor assured him, then paused with perfect comedic timing. "I just thought you should know that I also speak Italian, Portuguese, and Russian. That makes 9 languages total, not 6. Marcus stopped dancing and stared at her. "9 languages? I may have undersold myself slightly when we first met." Marcus threw back his head and laughed, spinning Elena around the dance floor. "Elena Al-Rashid, you are going to keep me surprised for the rest of my life, aren't you? Count on it, Mr. Sterling. Count on it." As they danced beneath crystal chandeliers, surrounded by friends and family who'd watched them fight for their love against impossible odds, Marcus realized that the best partnerships, in business and in life, were built on trust, shared values, and the courage to face any challenge together. And if Elena happened to speak 12 languages by their first anniversary, well, that would just make life more interesting. The end. 6 months later, the Sterling Al Rashid Foundation had opened technology centers in 12 countries. Omar Al-Zara and his associates were serving life sentences in federal prison, and Elena had indeed added 3 more languages to her repertoire. She claimed it was for business purposes, but Marcus suspected she just enjoyed watching his expression when she casually translated yet another conversation he thought was private. Their wedding was held at the Manhattan courthouse, where Elena had testified, with Agent Martinez as maid of honor and Judge Chen officiating. Elena wore her grandmother's pearls and carried jasmine flowers. Marcus wore his father's cufflinks and cried during the vows. They honeymooned in Switzerland, where Elena finally claimed her inheritance and immediately donated half of it to international literacy programs. When reporters asked why, she simply said, "Because knowledge should never be hoarded, it should be shared." Marcus Sterling had thought he was building a technology company. Instead, he'd found a partner who helped him build a legacy.